Let me tell you a story from my life. On the day of our divorce, my husband handed me a bank card with $10,000 on it. Outraged, I kept it hidden for 7 years. The day I finally went to the bank to close the account, an employee looked at me and whispered something that made me tremble with panic. I was huddled in a corner of the bank branch, clutching my knockoff handbag, its fake leather peeling in several spots. The line of people waiting at the teller windows was endless. In my palm, I clutched what I had considered the greatest humiliation of my life for 7 years. An old, red debit card, the paint on its edges worn and chipped, had lain dormant at the bottom of an old shoebox in my closet for over 2,500 days, mixed in with a pile of yellowed utility bills and some faded photos from my college days. If my landlord hadn't made a scene that very morning, threatening to throw all my belongings onto the street, if the debt I'd taken on from a lender for my mother's treatment wasn't coming due, I probably would have never taken it out of there. I sighed, looking at the ticket number in my hand and then at the electronic board, mentally calculating the weight. On this card were $10,000. That's what Daniel had said the day we went to the courthouse. A sum that, 7 years ago, was a fortune to me, and which now was my only lifeline to keep from drowning in this cruel current of life. The memory of that day returned as vividly as if it were yesterday. It was pouring rain, a curtain of water that seemed to want to wash everything away but couldn't cleanse the bitterness from my heart. We had just left the courthouse, the divorce decree still fresh with ink in my hand. Daniel stood there in a black trench coat that fell below his knees, holding a half-smoked cigarette. His face was an icy mask, devoid of any emotion. He looked at me, and I will never forget that look. It was a mixture of contempt, cruelty, and something akin to pity for an abandoned animal. He pulled this card from the inner pocket of his coat. He didn't hand it to me. He tossed it toward me. The card landed in a puddle of dirty water at my feet. He took a long drag from his cigarette, exhaling the smoke into the sheet of rain, and said in a frigid voice, "The pin is your birthday. There's $10,000 on it. Take it and start your life over. Consider it payment for your youth, so you never show your face to me again." I stood paralyzed in the rain, the water mixing with the salty tears streaming down my cheeks. I wanted to scream, to pick up that card and throw it in his face, to howl at him that I didn't need a trader's money. But my feet felt like lead, my pride crushed by poverty, hunger, and the dead end of my reality. In that moment, I bent down and picked up the mud-stained card. Not out of greed, but because I wanted to keep it as proof of his cruelty, as fuel to build a better life than his. Daniel saw me stoop for the money, and a mocking smile formed on his lips. He turned and walked toward the luxury sedan waiting for him, where a young, beautiful woman was sitting. His back disappeared into the misty rain, leaving me alone at a crossroads in my life, a cold bank card in my hand. For 7 years, in my most desperate moments, when I had to eat instant ramen for a month straight, or when life knocked me down, I would take out the card, look at it, and put it back. I was afraid that if I spent a single cent, I would have lost. I would become the beggar of his compassion, just as he wanted, but today I had truly lost. Pride doesn't pay the bills. Dignity doesn't buy medicine for my mother. With bitterness, I admitted my crushing defeat. I needed that money to settle my debts, and then I would take a night bus back to my small hometown in Ohio to get away forever from this glittering, deceitful New York City. The voice from the loudspeaker calling my number brought me back to reality. It was my turn. I took a deep breath, smoothed my messy hair, and walked to window number 5, telling myself that as soon as I withdrew the money, everything with Daniel would be over for good. Behind the bulletproof glass was a very young employee with flawless makeup, bright red lips, and curled eyelashes. She glanced indifferently, almost disdainfully, at my disheveled appearance, my worn-out shirt, and the dark circles under my eyes. It was to be expected. In this place that smelled of money, appearance is the first business card people use to gauge the respect you deserve. Trying to suppress my humiliation, I slid the old card and my driver's license through the slot in the glass. The employee picked up the card with 2 fingers, as if she were afraid of catching something from the grimy, worn plastic, and asked in a mechanical, emotionless voice, "What can I do for you today?" I swallowed hard. My voice was a whisper, but I tried to make it sound firm. "I want to close the account and withdraw all the cash." The girl's brow furrowed slightly. She probably thought there wouldn't be enough money on such a shabby card to be worth the trouble of withdrawing it all. Lazily, she swiped the card through the reader, her long fingers tapping rhythmically on the keyboard. Suddenly, the tapping stopped. The space around us seemed to freeze. I saw the girl adjust her glasses and lean closer to the computer screen, her eyes wide as saucers. Her expression shifted from initial disdain to astonishment, and then to absolute panic. She looked at me, then back at the screen, and her hands began to tremble violently. She stammered, her voice changing completely, becoming terrifyingly respectful. "Ma'am, Mrs. Laura, please, wait just one moment. The system requires a verification." With that, without giving me time to react, she jumped up and disappeared through a door behind the counter, leaving me sitting there in utter confusion. My heart was pounding. Was the card blocked? Had Daniel reported it lost long ago? Or worse, was the money connected to some illegal case I knew nothing about? A series of terrible scenarios flooded my mind, making me want to get up and run, but my legs were shaking so much I couldn't move them. Less than 2 minutes later, a middle-aged man in a suit, his forehead beaded with sweat, came rushing out with the employee. He looked at me as if he were seeing a savior. He hurriedly opened the counter door, came out, and gave me a deep, respectful nod. "Mrs. Laura, good morning. I'm the manager of this branch. Please, follow me to the VIP lounge so we can assist you as you deserve." Stunned, I let them lead me to a luxurious room with a soft velvet carpet, the air conditioning circulating, a cool breeze scented with a pleasant lemongrass essential oil. They invited me to sit on a leather sofa and served me a cup of hot tea. This 180-degree change in treatment frightened me even more. I set the cup on the table and, with trembling hands, asked, "Sir, what's going on?" "I just want to withdraw the $10,000 from the card. If there's a problem, I won't take it." The manager looked at me, then at the statement he was holding. He wiped the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. His voice trembled with emotion. "Mrs. Laura, perhaps you misremember or aren't aware of the information. This is a special fiduciary investment account opened 7 years ago with an automatic reinvestment and compound interest clause." I listened to these technical terms, my mind spinning, understanding nothing. I asked him gently, "I don't understand what you're saying. In short, how much money is on the card?" The manager took a deep breath, placed the statement in front of me, and with his index finger pointed to the very long row of numbers at the bottom. He said solemnly, "Ma'am, the total balance in the account, including the initial principal, accumulated interest, and matured investments, is over $2 million. Boom! An explosion went off in my head, making all the sounds around me blur. 2 million. Had I heard him wrong? Or had he misread it? Daniel said there was $10,000. That colossal figure danced before my eyes, mocking my poverty and the years of misery I had endured. I stared at the paper, counting the zeros over and over, feeling as if I were trapped in the most surreal dream. Why 2 million? Why had Daniel lied to me? Why did he give me a fortune and then cast me out like a beggar? I walked out of the bank's automatic doors, feeling like I was walking on clouds, my feet not touching the ground. In my hand, I no longer held a worn-out old plastic card, but a powerful, cold, and heavy black card. I took refuge in the shade of a sycamore tree on the sidewalk and, with trembling hands, pulled out my old cell phone with its cracked screen. My first thought wasn't about paying my debts or buying a bus ticket back home. It was to call Daniel. I had to demand an explanation. Why had he deceived me? Did he do something illegal 7 years ago and use this method to transfer his assets to me? The idea sent a shiver down my spine. If it was dirty money, I would rather starve to death than accept it and live the rest of my days in fear. My fingers slid across the keypad, dialing the sequence of numbers I had deleted from my contacts 7 years ago, but had never been able to erase from my memory. Each number that appeared made my heart beat faster. I pressed the call button, brought the phone to my ear, and held my breath. "The number you have dialed is not in service. Please check the number and try again." The operator's monotonous voice was like a bucket of cold water. I couldn't believe it. I hung up and called again, Once, twice, 5 times, always the same frigid response. I let my arm drop, a feeling of helplessness invading every cell in my body. Of course, 7 years had passed. He was a successful businessman. He had probably changed his number long ago to avoid annoyances, especially from an ex-wife like me. In my desperation, I suddenly remembered Ethan. Ethan was his best friend, his right-hand man in the old days. The day we went to the courthouse, Ethan was there too, leaning against a tree in the distance, looking at me with a strange expression, as if he wanted to say something but was holding himself back in anger. For 7 years, to sever all ties with my painful past, I hadn't contacted Ethan either. I searched my old cloud-synced contacts. Luckily, Ethan's number was still there. The phone rang for a long time, an eternity that tested my patience. Just as I was about to hang up, someone picked up on the other end. There was no polite, "Hello," just a heavy, hoarse, and hostile breath. "Who is this?" I cleared my throat, trying to speak calmly. "It's me, Laura. Daniel's ex, his ex-wife." The line went silent. A silence so long I thought the call had been dropped. The emptiness made my skin crawl. Suddenly, a dry laugh echoed, so cold and bitter it chilled my blood. Ethan growled each word, hissing through his teeth. "You still have the nerve to call me, Laura? You're unbelievable. Where the hell have you been for 7 years? What rock have you been hiding under? Why are you calling today of all days?" His shouting left me stunned. Ethan had always been a calm, kind person. He always called me sis sweetly. He had never raised his voice at me. His unjustified anger both scared and infuriated me. I stammered, "What are you talking about? I'm calling to ask about Daniel. Do you have his new number? I need to talk to him urgently." "It's about the bank card." "The bank card," Ethan interrupted, his voice rising, cracking with emotion. "So it was about the money. You finally remembered the money, huh? Where were you when he was suffering like a dog? Where were you when he was lying alone in the dark? Now that the money is yours, you remember him?" I stood frozen in the middle of the street, my ears ringing from his harsh accusations. I didn't understand anything. Daniel suffering and lying alone? Wasn't he living happily with his young, beautiful wife? "Are you crazy?" I shouted into the phone, tears welling up. "Where is Daniel? I want to see him and have him explain everything. I don't want his money. I just want to know why. Ask him?" Ethan's laugh on the phone sounded like a sob, a broken and tragic sound. "If you want to ask him, you'll have to go down to hell to do it. He's dead. He died almost 7 years ago, 3 months after you left." The phone slipped from my hand and fell with a sharp crack on the pavement. The already broken screen shattered into a spiderweb of glass. I stood there, a lone, dry tree in the river of people, feeling as if an invisible hand had just reached into my chest and squeezed my heart. I don't know how I ended up at the diner. It was a small place tucked away on a side street where our group used to meet to talk about our entrepreneurial dreams when we barely had any money. The diner was still the same, the walls yellowed with age, the wooden booths worn down, the smell of cheap coffee ingrained in every corner. Only the people had changed. I sat hunched in a booth, hugging a glass of ice water, my eyes fixed on the door. Ethan walked in, bringing the sweltering heat of the summer afternoon with him. When I saw him, I almost didn't recognize him. The handsome, polished man of the past looked years older, his hair almost completely gray, his face etched with bitter lines, and his eyes sunken and dark. He pulled out a chair and sat across from me. He threw a pack of cigarettes on the table and looked at me with a mix of pity, reproach, and a hint of resentment. "Tell me," I began, my voice hoarse, "this thing about Daniel being dead, it's a joke, right? It's impossible." Ethan didn't answer right away. He lit a cigarette, took a long drag, and exhaled a cloud of smoke. Through the white veil, I could see his eyes were red. He laughed without joy. "You think I have time to joke about my best friend's life? He's really dead, Laura. Bone cancer. Terminal." The words terminal cancer landed between us like 2 lead weights. I felt my chest tighten, making it hard to breathe. The image of Daniel on the day of the divorce flashed in my mind. His loose black trench coat, his pale, colorless face, and his slightly unsteady posture, which at the time I had attributed to being drunk or to his contempt for me. Ethan tapped the ash from his cigarette and, in a grave voice, began to recount the story I had missed for 7 years. He told me about the days when Daniel started feeling sharp pains in his bones but hid it from me, lying about business trips to go to the hospital for tests. He told me about the day Daniel got the results, sitting on a hospital bench all afternoon in silence. At that time, Daniel's company was at its peak, with a bright future ahead, but fate had cruelly erased him from life. Why didn't he tell me? I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. I was his wife. Whatever happened, we should have faced it together. Why did he lie and say he was having an affair? Why did he push me away? Ethan looked at me, his expression softening slightly, but still filled with pain. Do you remember what you were like back then, Laura? You were a delicate flower. You cried over everything. You were scared of ugly things. Daniel knew you better than anyone. He didn't want you to see him in the emaciated, pathetic state of a dying man. Ethan continued, each word a stab to my heart. He wanted you to remember him as the handsome, arrogant Daniel, the bastard who left you, so you would have the courage to hate him, to forget him, and to move on. Sometimes, hate is a more effective painkiller than pity. It makes you stronger. I bit my lip to suppress a sob. So his cruelty that day was the most tender and painful protection he could offer me. I had lived for 7 years, fueled by resentment, using my hatred for him as the engine to overcome my misery, to keep from falling apart. I thought I was strong, but in reality, I was just a stupid puppet in the clumsy play he had staged. But what about the money? I hesitated. The $2 million. Where did he get that much money at that time? Ethan stubbed out his cigarette and sighed. He sold the company, sold it at a loss, right when it was at its peak. In the business world, the rumor was that he had gone crazy or had gambling debts and needed cash urgently. He let the competition drive the price down, losing almost half its real value, just to raise those $2 million in clean money to deposit in the bank for you. He said that in this life, he couldn't protect you anymore, so he would let the money do it in his place. I buried my face in my hands, tears streaming uncontrollably. I remembered how for years I had cursed him, wishing him the worst every time I struggled. I reveled in the thought that he was living happily at the expense of my pain. But the truth was, while I was hating him, he was silently selling his life's work, selling his last ounces of strength to pave the way for me. The unfaithful husband I hated so much turned out to be the man who loved me to the point of foolishness. Ethan ordered another black coffee, on the rocks. The clinking of the ice against the glass sounded incredibly lonely. He began to delve deeper into those dark days, into the secrets Daniel had taken to his grave. Do you know what the first question he asked the doctor was when they handed him his death sentence? Ethan looked at me, his gaze lost in a painful memory. He didn't ask how much time he had left or if there was a cure. He asked the doctor, "Will I be in a lot of pain? Will I get really ugly?" I was frozen. Daniel had never been a man who cared about his appearance. He always laughed when I told him he looked like a mess. And yet, in the face of death, his greatest fear was ugliness. Ethan smiled sadly. At the time, I called him an idiot too. About to die and worried about being handsome or ugly. But he grabbed my hand, it was ice cold, and said, "You don't get it, Ethan. Laura loves beautiful things, and she's a neat freak. I don't want her to see me losing all my hair, a skeleton lying in a hospital bed with a bunch of tubes. I don't want her to have to change my diapers, to have to clean up after me. I'm scared. I'm scared of seeing the horror in her eyes when she sees me turned into a monster." My tears started flowing again, hot, rolling down my cheeks. I remembered that I had, in fact, always been afraid of hospitals, the smell of disinfectant, and seeing open wounds. Once, Daniel fell off his motorcycle and scraped his arms and legs. The sight of the blood made me turn pale. He had to bandage himself while comforting me. He remembered everything. He remembered even my smallest fears and used his own pain to shield my weakness. He was afraid it would traumatize me, that I would suffer, so he chose to push me away, so I would only remember him as a handsome traitor, not a walking corpse. He suffered a lot, Laura. Ethan's voice broke. Bone cancer is one of the most painful. pains like someone drilling into your spinal cord, so bad that even the strongest painkillers didn't work. There were nights he would bite down on a towel so he wouldn't scream. He would be drenched in sweat, writhing like a cooked shrimp. But as soon as morning came, he would force himself to sit up, comb his hair, put on that thick black trench coat to hide his increasingly emaciated body, and go out to play the part of an arrogant CEO. I pictured the scene, and my heart clenched. The man I had shared my life with, the strong man who had always protected me, had to endure that torture in solitude. And what was I doing at that time? I was sitting in my rented room, stewing in my heartbreak and silently cursing him. My indifference, my stupid naivety, was the second knife in his back. After the cruel illness, he told me. Ethan choked on a sob. He said to me, "Ethan, it hurts so much. I want to call Laura. I just want her to give me a hug. But I don't dare. I'm afraid that if I hear her voice, I'll soften. I'll start crying and begging her to come back. And that would be pathetic, selfish. I'm about to die. I can't drag her life down with me." I covered my mouth and broke down, sobbing uncontrollably in the middle of the empty diner. "Daniel, you were such a fool. You took it upon yourself to decide for me. You assumed I couldn't handle it. But you don't know that the pain of being abandoned without knowing why, the pain of living with resentment and hatred for 7 years, is as cruel as death. If you had told me even just one word, I would have been willing to walk through that hell with you. No matter how ugly, how bad you smelled, how emaciated you were still my husband, the man I loved most. But now, it was all too late. My apologies, my love, he would never be able to hear them. I dried my tears with a paper napkin, trying to calm myself. There was still something I didn't understand, something that had tormented me for years, making me feel inferior and humiliated. It was that woman, the young, beautiful, and elegant woman waiting for Daniel in the car that day. Who was she? I asked in a choked voice. Ethan, the girl who was in the car the day of the divorce. Was she really his new girlfriend? Did she know about his illness? At the mention of her, Ethan let out a laugh so bitter it was extreme. He shook his head. New girlfriend? What the hell? She was a low-level model, a senior in the drama department that Daniel hired. Hired? My eyes widened. Yes, hired, Ethan emphasized. He paid her $500 for a day's work. Daniel said he needed someone to play the part of the mistress and stage a final breakup scene. He chose her because she had a sophisticated, haughty air, the type of woman you were always jealous of. He wanted you to believe he had changed because he was crazy about a younger, more beautiful, and richer girl than you, so you would leave without looking back. $500. The price of the performance that broke my heart and changed my life completely. Just $500. Suddenly, I started to laugh, a laugh that turned into tears. I had been jealous. I had suffered. I had compared myself to a non-existent mistress, felt insecure about being old and ugly, inferior to her in every way, and it was all a paid performance. That day, Ethan continued in a solemn voice, after you left, Daniel sat in the car watching your back in the rearview mirror. The actress tried to take his arm to comfort him, following the script. He slapped her hand away, shouting, "Get out!" Then he buried his head in the steering wheel and started coughing violently. He coughed up blood, staining a white handkerchief red. He told me, "Ethan, I'm such a bastard. I've hurt Laura. Seeing her cry tears me apart inside. I just want to get out of the car, hug her, and tell her I'm sorry, that I don't want a divorce anymore. Let's go home, honey." But I couldn't do it. I couldn't. I listened as if someone were strangling my heart. I imagined Daniel, in that luxury car, appearing like an unfaithful man on the outside, but inside, with a body ravaged by disease and a heart bleeding for me. He wore that thick black trench coat not to look elegant, but to hide the tremors of pain, to conceal his emaciated body. He smoked non-stop, not out of addiction, but perhaps so the bitter taste of smoke would mask the metallic taste of blood in his throat. He acted too well, didn't he? Ethan looked at me, his eyes full of pain. He fooled you. He fooled everyone. Everyone insulted him, called him a social climber, a user, and he took it all. He said he'd rather carry a bad reputation forever than see you suffer. He used his honor as a man to buy your freedom. You hated him for 7 years, but he loved you until his last breath. I stood there, paralyzed, feeling like the most foolish person in the world. I saw what he wanted me to see. I believed what he wanted me to believe, never looking beyond into his eyes to see the immense pain they held. A $500 performance cost 7 years of my youth and his entire life. If only I had been more insistent that day. If I hadn't turned away immediately out of pride. If I had been perceptive enough to notice the strangeness of his actions. But life has no if-onlys. Everything was written according to the tragic script Daniel had created. And I was the naive protagonist who played her part perfectly until the end, knowing nothing. Ethan stubbed out his third cigarette in the already full ashtray. The smoke swirled and dissipated like Daniel's short life. I remained silent, but a storm was raging inside me. The question about the $2 million was still buzzing in my head, a figure too large, almost illogical for a growing company that still needed working capital like Daniel's at the time. Ethan read the doubt in my eyes. He smiled bitterly, a pained, crooked smile. "You're wondering where the money came from, aren't you, Laura? Do you know what vultures do when a lion is wounded on the savannah?" I shook my head, a lump in my throat preventing me from speaking. Ethan continued, his voice turning gravelly, like the grinding of stones. "They swoop in to devour it." As soon as Daniel knew he didn't have much time left, his first decision wasn't to check into a hospital, but to sell the company. It was his baby, the one he had built from scratch, his sweat and tears, his entire youth. Ethan recounted how Daniel needed cash urgently, and most importantly, it had to be clean money, legally transferred so I could use it without any legal trouble in the future. The rumor that Daniel wanted to sell spread, and investors descended like hungry beasts. They didn't care about the company's real value, only that Daniel needed the money now. The competitors Daniel had once defeated, the ones who smiled and shook his hand at parties, now came back to squeeze him dry. "He accepted everything," Ethan said, rage glinting in his eyes as he recalled the scene. The company was really worth almost $4 million, but they lowballed him down to 2.5. Daniel didn't haggle over a single word. He had only one condition: immediate cash payment into the fiduciary account. He signed the contract to sell his creation with a hand that trembled so much he could barely hold the pen, having to cover his mouth with a handkerchief from time to cough. I listened, as if 1,000 needles were piercing my heart. I remembered reading in the business section back then that the company had changed hands. I even laughed with disdain, thinking that greedy Daniel had sold it to go enjoy life with his mistress. I had no idea that behind that trembling signature was a silent sacrifice. He sold his pride, his career, the honor of a businessman to secure the financial future of the woman he was about to abandon. Ethan looked at me, his eyes boring into my soul. He used $500,000 to pay the employees' salaries, settle debts, and give his parents something for their old age. The remaining $2 million, he put it all on that card for you. He said he owed you a complete home in this life. He owed you children, so he was paying you back with money. Even though he knew money can't buy happiness, at least it would mean you wouldn't have to bow your head to anyone because of poverty. I buried my face in my hands, tears soaking my fingers. I had accused him of being callous, cruel, but his cruelty was filled with love. He had planned everything, cleaning up any trace, enduring the humiliation of his rivals, just to make sure that when I held that card, I would be the freest and richest woman. And he accepted walking away with empty hands, carrying a bad reputation and a physical pain no one knew about. In the empty diner, the melancholic music of a singer-songwriter played from a speaker in the corner, making the atmosphere even more somber. Ethan took a sip of his black coffee. The bitterness seemed to wake him up to continue the unfinished story. He looked at me with a certain curiosity and sighed. Actually, that day, he and I made a bet. A bet I lost spectacularly, and he won, but with a broken heart. I lifted my swollen eyes to Ethan, my voice cracking. "A bet? You bet on my divorce?" "Not on the divorce, but on the card." Ethan shook his head, his voice tinged with sadness. "When he gave you the card, I tried to stop him. I told him giving it to you like that was a humiliation, that you would never accept it, or that you'd pick it up just to throw it back at him. Your pride is bigger than a cathedral, I told him. Your dignity is everything. How could you accept money from the man who betrayed you? I fell silent. Ethan was right. At that moment, my dignity was the only thing I had to hold on to. If Daniel had given me the money kindly, I probably would have thrown it in his face. But he tossed it on the ground. He used the most hurtful words to provoke me, causing me to keep it as a trophy of my hatred. Ethan continued. Daniel laughed and told me, "You don't know my wife. Laura is stubborn, but she's also very practical. I have to make her hate me so much that she'll want to keep that card to rub it in my face someday. But I'll bet you anything she won't spend a single cent. She'll lock it away. She'll starve. She'll take a job washing dishes before she touches a dime of this bastard husband's money." Did he really say that? I stammered, feeling a sharp pain in my chest. He knew me perfectly. He knew my strong yet contradictory character. Yes, that's what he said. Ethan nodded. He said that money wasn't for you to waste right away. It was the ultimate safety net. He wanted you to manage on your own, to stumble and get back up, to mature. Only when you were truly backed into a corner, when life had you cornered, would you remember the card. And at that moment, that money would be your savior, not a psychological burden. I thought back over the last 7 years, the countless times I was broke, the times I picked up the card and put it down again. I thought I was doing it to maintain my dignity, to show Daniel I didn't need him. But in reality, I was just following the path he had laid out for me. He wanted me to be strong, to stand on my own 2 feet, but he also feared I would fall, so he had secretly placed a soft cushion at the end of the road. I lost, Ethan smiled bitterly. I thought you'd spend the money or throw the card away, but you kept it for 7 years. Just as he predicted, he won, but the price was too high. He gambled with your misunderstanding and his own loneliness. Sometimes I'd ask him, "And what if Laura really does throw the card away?" He would just smile sadly and say, "Then that's my bad luck, and she'll have her own destiny. God will provide. I'm sure she won't starve." Hearing this, I couldn't hold back and broke down crying. "Daniel, you idiot, the biggest con man in the world. You bet a whole fortune, all your love, on a game whose outcome you would never see. You trusted my pride more than I trusted it myself. I thought I was getting revenge on you by living in misery, but in reality, I was just proving you right that you loved me and knew me deeply." Leaving the diner, Ethan took me to an old apartment building on the outskirts, just a block from where I had lived in a rented room 7 years ago. Yellowed walls covered in moss, iron bars on the windows jutting out chaotically, the cry of a child, the cough of an old man drifting from the small windows. I walked down a dark, damp hallway. The smell of leftover food mixed with mildew turned my stomach. "Daniel lived here?" I asked Ethan, unable to believe my eyes. A man who had lived in a suburban house, driven luxury cars, and worn designer clothes like Daniel, how could he endure such a cramped and miserable place? Ethan didn't turn around, just silently climbed the chipped steps. He moved here right after the divorce. He sold all his personal belongings, only keeping some old clothes. He said it was cheap here, that every dollar saved counted, and besides, it was close to you. My heart sank, close to me. So for 7 years, while I thought he was in some paradise with his mistress, he was hiding in a dark corner right next to me. The geographical distance was only a few hundred yards, but the distance of misunderstanding was thousands of miles. "I still rent this apartment. I pay every month to keep it just as it was," Ethan said, stopping in front of a peeling blue wooden door with a rusty lock. "I can't bring myself to empty it because his last breaths are in here. He forbade me from telling anyone, especially you. He was afraid that if you saw him living like a rat, it would traumatize you for life." Ethan put the key in the lock. The metallic sound echoed in the silence. The door swung open, releasing a gust of cold air and a strong smell of disinfectant. Even after 7 years, that characteristic scent of illness seemed to have seeped into the wood, into every brick. I stepped into the tiny apartment, barely 150 square feet, dark and suffocating. The furniture was desolate. A single iron bed with a worn mattress, a small plastic table, a wooden chair with a broken leg propped up by a brick. On the wall, sticky notes with schedules for taking medication, for injecting painkillers. In a corner, a pile of empty medicine boxes, dried IV bags. This was where Daniel spent his last days. This wasn't a place to live. It looked more like a tomb for someone waiting to die. I touched the yellowed pillow, imagining Daniel lying here, alone, fighting excruciating pain, without family, without a wife, only 4 cold walls for company. On stormy nights, while I was bundled under my blanket, old as it was, crying with self-pity, he was here, gritting his teeth to endure every injection, every seizure, and the heart-wrenching longing for me. He lived here for 3 months, Ethan said, leaning against the doorframe, his voice choked. 3 months of hell. He didn't dare turn on the light for fear his shadow in the window would attract the neighbors' attention. He walked on tiptoes. Even to cough, he would cover his mouth. He locked himself in the darkness, becoming a living ghost, all for fear that you might pass by chance and discover the truth. I fell to my knees on the cold floor, tears streaming uncontrollably. This sacrifice was too great, too cruel for him. Why was he so foolish? Why did he choose the most painful way to protect me? I would have preferred him to be selfish, to use that money for his treatment, to hire someone to care for him, instead of enduring a life worse than death. I sat on the floor, letting the dust stain my new dress. This apartment was like a time capsule, preserving Daniel's loneliness and suffering. Ethan walked to the window and pulled back a coarse, gray curtain. The faint evening light streamed in, illuminating a strange object on the table pressed against the window. It was a pair of black, high-powered military binoculars. "Come look," Ethan called to me, his voice heavy. "See how he was unfaithful to you, how he enjoyed himself, just as you imagined." I got up, trembling, and shuffled toward the window. The binoculars were fixed on a homemade wooden stand, aimed outward through a small gap in the bars. I leaned down and looked through the eyepiece. The image that appeared made my heart stop for an instant. Through the lenses, I could see with perfect clarity the balcony of my old rented apartment across the street and the bus stop where I waited every morning. From this angle, I could see my entire life. I could see myself hanging laundry in the morning, cooking noodles at night, sitting thoughtfully, combing my hair by the window. I pulled my eyes away from the binoculars and took a few steps back. A chill ran down my spine. Not of fear, but of an overwhelming emotion. "He spent most of the day sitting right here," Ethan said, pointing to the old wooden chair, its paint worn away. "When the pain was unbearable, he would lie down. As soon as he felt a little better, he would sit back down, his eyes glued to these binoculars. He said that only by seeing you go to work and come home safe and sound could he close his eyes and get a little sleep." I caressed the cold binoculars, tears blurring my vision again. I remembered those days when I felt alone and helpless in this big city. I pitied myself for coming and going alone, with no one to pick me up or ask how I was. But I didn't know that there were always eyes watching me silently from a distance. When I stumbled, when the rain soaked me, a man across the street was suffering, wanting to run and protect me, but powerless. He could only grip the arms of the chair until his knuckles were white. "One day, it was pouring rain," Ethan recounted, his gaze distant. "You were coming home late from work, without an umbrella, running from the bus stop to the house. He saw it and, in his panic, tried to go out to give you an umbrella. But he barely took 2 steps before he collapsed. His legs were already too weak. He couldn't walk. He lay there on the floor, pounding it with his fists and crying like a child. He cursed his useless legs. He called himself trash. He said to me, 'My wife is getting soaked, Ethan. She's going to get sick. What do I do?' Ethan's story recreated the tragic scene before my eyes. I imagined Daniel, my proud Daniel, lying helplessly on the dirty floor, crying because he couldn't give his wife an umbrella. His concern wasn't sweet words or expensive gifts. It was the torment of being unable to protect the person he loved. I picked up the binoculars and hugged them to my chest as if they were a part of him. "Daniel, you were such a fool. You endured and watched in silence. For what? You used the clumsiest, most painful way to love me, to be by my side in your final days, separated by a street, but like 2 parallel worlds that could never touch. I stood frozen by the rusty window, my trembling hands clutching the cold binoculars. Outside, the afternoon sun had set, leaving only the yellowish glow of streetlights on the asphalt. Through the lenses, the world across the street appeared sharp, so close I felt I could reach out and touch it. My tears welled up again, blurring the image, but the memories returned sharper than ever. I remembered the stormy days, huddled at the bus stop, cold and filled with self-pity, cursing my unfair life and my unfaithful husband. I remembered the nights I came home late, walking nervously down the empty alley, always with a sense of unease, as if someone were following me. Back then, I thought it was a hallucination brought on by loneliness, or the fear of a woman learning to live alone. It turned out it wasn't a hallucination, it was Daniel's eyes. "He sat here," Ethan said, patting the worn wooden chair, his voice low, as if afraid to disturb the soul of the departed. Every day, as soon as he woke up, he would drag himself to this chair. When the pain was too much to sit, he would lie on the floor, but his hands would still be clutching the binocular stand. He knew your schedule better than you did. What time you left, what you were wearing, if you forgot your umbrella, he knew everything. I put down the binoculars and turned to look at the empty chair. I imagined a gaunt Daniel, his face contorted by physical pain, but his eyes bright, fixed on those inert lenses, just to see the figure of the woman he had pushed away. He was there, across the street, witnessing all my joys and sorrows, my curses and my tears for him, but he chose a cruel silence. "There were days you got sick and didn't leave the house," Ethan continued, his gaze distant. "Daniel would pace anxiously in this tiny apartment like a wounded animal. He wanted to call you. He wanted to cross the street to see how you were, but he was afraid you'd see his ghostly appearance, so he would call me. He would force me to pretend I was just passing by, to buy you medicine and soup and bring it to you. He insisted over and over that I not mention his name, to just say I was an old friend who happened to be in the area. I was stunned. The memory of that hot soup and the bag of medicine came flooding back. At the time, I was surprised Ethan knew I was sick, but my fatigue and my immense pride kept me from asking further. I accepted it and shut the door in his face. I ate that soup, took those pills, never knowing that a few hundred yards away, a man was sitting in this chair, sighing with relief when he saw the light in my room turn on. Did he watch me like this for 3 months?" I asked, my voice broken by a sob. Watching the miserable life he had condemned me to? Did he feel happy, satisfied? Ethan shook his head, a bitter smile on his lips. "Happy? How could he be, Laura? Every time he saw you struggling, he would beat his chest. He'd say he was useless, that he claimed to love his wife but was letting her suffer, but he preferred you to suffer a little materially than to suffer your whole life over his death. He accepted being a helpless spectator just so you could play the role of a strong woman in the drama of your life." I caressed the cold back of the chair, feeling as if his warmth was still there. "Oh, Daniel, you fool. You thought you were protecting me, but you were punishing yourself with the harshest sentence. The sentence of separation in life, the sentence of watching the person you love most suffer without being able to help. You turned love into a silent, painful sacrifice, and me, unknowingly, into the most callous person in the world." Ethan bent down under the bed and pulled out an old tin box, the kind once used for cookies. He opened it. Inside was a notebook with a dark brown leather cover. The leather was worn at the corners but carefully preserved. Ethan handed it to me with both hands, with a reverent gesture, as if giving me a sacred relic. "This is what he left," Ethan said quietly. He had no one to talk to, so he poured everything in here. In his last days, when his throat hurt so much he couldn't speak, this pen was his only friend. I took the journal. The smell of old paper mixed with disinfectant hit me, a scent of farewell and nostalgia. I opened it, trembling. Daniel's handwriting, so familiar and painful. The first few lines were neat and firm, typical of the decisive man I knew. Date: "Today Laura left. The house is empty." I thought I'd feel relieved, that I'd set her free. But why does my heart hurt so much? When she walked out the door with her suitcase, I almost ran after her to stop her. "I'm a coward, Daniel. The biggest coward in the world. But well, one sharp pain and it's over. Laura, you have to live well. Don't remember this bastard husband. My tears fell onto the page, smudging the blue ink. I remembered the day I left. I walked quickly, my head held high with pride, without looking back once. I thought he would be celebrating with his mistress, but it turned out he was tormenting himself in the cold, empty house. I turned the pages. The entries became more spaced out, but the content focused more and more on my life. Date. Today, looking through the binoculars, I saw Laura cut her hair. The short hair makes her look younger, but also more rebellious. She must want to make a clean break with the past. She's lost so much weight. She's been wearing that beige coat for 3 years. Why doesn't she buy a new one? It's so cold, and she's dressed so lightly. Foolish girl. I told her to take the money and spend it. Why is she torturing herself like this? Does she want me to die of a broken heart? I touched my hair. It was waist length now, but 7 years ago, yes, I had cut it in a fit of rage. I thought no one would care, but it turned out every lock that fell pained him. I still have that old coat. Not because I didn't want to buy a new one, but because it was the first birthday present he ever gave me. I wore it to remember a dead love, but for him, it was proof of my misery. Date. My legs are hurting so much today. It feels like 1,000 fire ants are chewing on my bones. I took my medicine, but it's no use. Lying alone in the dark, I suddenly craved the seafood soup Laura used to make. I always used to complain that it was too salty, and now I can never have it again. I look across the street and see her light is on. What is she doing? Probably working late. Laura, I miss you. I'm so scared. Scared of dying and no one will be there to remind you to bundle up, no one to make you dinner. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The letters were starting to become uneven, with ink blots, perhaps from his tears or the sweat of his pain. Every word I read squeezed my heart. A man facing death, enduring terrible physical pain, yet his biggest concern was still whether his wife was eating and staying warm. He longed for a bowl of soup, such a simple wish, and yet so unattainable. I hugged the journal, burying my head in my knees, remorse hitting me like a tsunami. I had blamed him for being callous, unfaithful, but I never once asked how he felt. I was living in the cocoon of my own pain, never knowing that just outside it, a man was using his life to shield me from the storm. These weren't words. They were the fragments of a heart that loved to the point of desperation, stabbing into my soul, a sharp, persistent pain. I kept turning the pages of the journal. Among the tear-filled entries were pages with dry notations, full of numbers and strange names. At first, I didn't understand, but the more I read, the more my blood ran cold. This wasn't just a diary. It was a ledger, a list of unwritten rules Daniel had secretly put in place to protect me. Date. Transfer $5,000 to Dr. Santos at the hospital for Laura's mother's thyroid nodule surgery. Make it clear it's from a financial aid program for low-income individuals. If my mother-in-law finds out the money is from her son-in-law, she'd rather die than have the surgery. Laura is broke. She can't get that money. I was floored. 4 years ago, my mother was diagnosed with a tumor. She needed surgery urgently. I scrambled everywhere for money, without success. Just as I was about to consider selling a kidney, the hospital informed me that my mother had been selected for a 100% grant. I was overjoyed. I thanked God, the doctors. It turned out God was Daniel, a man who had been dead for 3 years. He had anticipated my family's health problems and had left a fund for Ethan to manage. Date. Give $1,000 to Officer Riley. Laura's motorcycle accident today was the other guy's fault, but he's a thug. Laura is alone. She can't handle him. I need Riley to apply some pressure so she gets a fair settlement. They can't take advantage of my wife. That old bike is a death trap, and I can't buy her a car anymore. I remembered the accident. A tattooed guy going the wrong way hit me. He was aggressive at first, but soon after, the police arrived and sorted everything out quickly. The guy's attitude changed. He apologized and paid me a generous sum. I boasted to my friends about my good luck, about how justice had been served. I didn't know that justice had been bought with my late husband's money and connections. "You see," Ethan said, sitting across from me, his voice quiet but his eyes full of pain. You thought you were strong and lucky, that you overcame everything without needing Daniel's money. But you were wrong, Laura. This society is cruel. The unwritten rule is that the weak always get crushed. He pointed to the notebook. The times you got a well-paying side job, the times the landlord let you postpone the rent, the times you ran into people who helped you, it was all planned by Daniel before he died, or executed by me according to his last wishes. He used the interest from other investments to buy your peace of mind. He didn't want you to see the dark side of society. He wanted you to keep believing in kindness, in decent people. I closed the notebook, trembling, feeling my entire sense of self-confidence crumble. My strength and independence, of which I was so proud, were an illusion. I was like a child in a glass bubble, believing she was flying free, when in reality, an invisible hand was holding me up. I had never truly grown up. I was still living off his money, under his protection, just in a more subtle way. Why? I asked, a lump in my throat. Ethan, why did he do that? He had already given me the $2 million. Out of fear, Ethan replied, his voice fading. He was afraid that if you used the $2 million too soon, you would become dependent. You wouldn't mature. But he was also afraid that if he didn't help you in difficult moments, life would crush you. You'd lose faith. He wanted you to suffer just enough to grow, but to be lucky enough not to fall. A contradictory, painful calculation that only someone who loves to the point of madness would come up with. I looked at Ethan, then at the dilapidated apartment. In the darkness of solitude and imminent death, Daniel had mapped out a perfect plan to protect me for 7 years. He used his money to bend the cruel, unwritten rules. He used his contacts to smooth my path. I lived in that artificial luck, while the creator of that luck was slowly consumed by pain. The feeling of debt added to the guilt, making my chest feel like it would explode. I opened the journal again, stopping at a page more crumpled than the others. The writing was pressed deep into the paper, marking the other side, proof that it was written in a state of great agitation. The date corresponded to a cold winter day 6 years ago, a day I remembered well because of a small incident. Date. It's drizzling today. The street is slippery. Looking through the binoculars, I saw Laura slip and fall at the bus stop. My heart stopped. I tried to run to the door, but my legs gave out from the pain. Then, I saw a guy, an intellectual type with glasses, run to help her up. He dusted off her coat, even bent down to pick up her bag. They talked about something, and Laura smiled. She smiled at him. I remembered that man, just a kind stranger who saw me fall and helped me. We exchanged a few words, and I smiled out of courtesy. But in Daniel's eyes, that smile was a knife to his pride and his possessive love. My blood boiled. Daniel continued writing. I wanted to run out there and punch him, to scream, "Get your filthy hands off my wife!" But then I looked at myself a cripple, a skeleton waiting for death. What right do I have to be jealous? What right do I have to forbid her from smiling at others? I was the one who threw her out. I read those tormented lines with a mixture of sorrow and tenderness, jealous of a stranger, with a fierce jealousy like that of a child whose toy is taken away. But then he retreated into his shell of self-pity. His love was both noble and mundane, generous and selfish, in a moving way. He seemed like a good guy. The next paragraph was written in a clumsier script, as if he were forcing himself to accept reality. If he's a good person, if he can take care of Laura in my place, I should be happy. I'm about to die. Laura needs a shoulder to lean on, but why does my heart hurt so much? Daniel, you're a coward. You say you want her to be happy, but you can't stand to see her happy with someone else. You're selfish. You deserve to die. I broke down, sobbing, my tears soaking the page. Daniel, you fool, so childish, jealous of the whole world, but you didn't dare to be jealous of your own fate. You called yourself selfish, but what selfish person would accept watching from the shadows as the one they love is cared for, without daring to step out and ruin it all? He broke his water glass that day. Ethan intervened, his voice tinged with sadness and a sigh. He called me to come over. He made me investigate who that guy with the glasses was. He said if he was a good man, he'd let it go, but if he was a womanizer, he'd arrange for someone to teach him a lesson. I looked at him, and I didn't know whether to laugh or get angry. a guy on the verge of death and still worried about protecting the wife he himself had pushed away. I closed the journal and hugged it to my chest. The jealousy of a dying man might sound ridiculous, but it was the clearest proof of the love that still burned in him. He never let me go, never stopped loving me for a second. He just hid that love, buried it deep in his heart along with his physical pain so that I could move on freely. But he didn't know that the freedom he granted me was so empty and cold without his warmth. I kept turning the pages of the journal, but towards the end, it became harder to read. Daniel's writing was no longer firm and neat, but shaky and irregular. In many places, the ink had bled, and the pen had pierced the paper. These were signs that his strength was failing, that the hands that had signed multi-million-dollar contracts could now barely hold a pen. Date: it hurts too much today. Feels like my bones are shattering into pieces. I've had 2 shots of morphine, but they do nothing. Painkillers are like water to me now. Ethan told me to check into the hospital so they can monitor me, but I shook my head. What for? The end is already written. Here. Even though it's cramped, at least I can see Laura's window. In the hospital, those 4 cold white walls would kill me before the cancer does. I caressed those trembling letters, feeling his helplessness. Morphine, a name foreign to me, but it was his only solace in those days. I remembered my sleepless nights, worrying about money, never knowing that just across the street, my husband was battling excruciating pain, resorting to powerful painkillers just to get some intermittent sleep. Date: I had another pain crisis last night. I bit down on the towel so I wouldn't scream. I was afraid the neighbors would hear me, that my desperate screams would cross the street and wake Laura up. I'm a coward. A little pain and I already want to cry. But it really hurts, Ethan. It hurts so much I want to take a knife and cut my own leg off. But then I think, if I were a cripple, I'd be so ugly. Laura would be scared to death to see me. Better to just endure. Ethan sat beside me, his head bowed, his voice choked. There were nights I'd go to see him and find him curled up in a ball on the floor, soaked in sweat. He wouldn't let me turn on the light. He wanted to be in the dark. He'd tell me, "Don't turn it on. I don't want you to see me cry." I'd touch his forehead, and it was ice cold. His whole body would be shaking as if he had malaria. I wanted to take him to the ER, but he refused flatly. He'd cover my mouth with his hand and whisper, "Don't make any noise. Laura's a light sleeper. What if she hears us?" I listened to Ethan, feeling my heart being squeezed. "Daniel, you endured all that for the stupid fear of waking me up. You protected my sleep, my false peace, with your own physical torment. You considered me your everything, but you treated yourself like nothing. Date: what I fear most is delirium. Yesterday, Ethan told me that with the high fever, I kept calling Laura's name. I'm so scared. Scared that in a moment of unconsciousness, I'll grab the phone and call her, that I'll start crying and begging her to come back. I've already told Ethan. If he sees me losing control, he should tie me down or give me a sedative to put me to sleep. Under no circumstances can I contact Laura. I've played the villain this far. I can't fail at the end. Laura has to hate me. Only then can she live well. Reading the last line, I could take no more. I buried my head in the journal, sobbing uncontrollably. His cruelty to himself was terrifying. He was afraid his love would hurt me, that his weakness would be a burden. He shackled himself physically and mentally just to maintain the role of the unfaithful husband he had created. I hated him, just as he wanted. But now, that hatred was turning against me, causing me a pain 1,000 times greater than the truth. Ethan waited for my sobs to quiet down. Then, in silence, he reached under the table where a small safe was hidden by an old rag. He turned the combination. The sound of the lock clicking echoed dryly. He pulled out a waterproof Ziplocked bag sealed with duct tape. He held it in his hands for a moment, his gaze thoughtful, as if weighing something very important, before slowly placing it in my hands. "This is the last thing he left," Ethan said, his voice grave and solemn. "He gave me very clear instructions. I could only give you this bag in one specific scenario, if you discovered the whole truth and came here. If you went your whole life without ever touching that card, if you continued to live in peace and forgot him, then I was to burn this bag and scatter the ashes to the wind." I took the bag, feeling its weight in my hands, though it didn't seem to contain much. It was the weight of a secret, of a last will buried for 7 years. Trembling, I tore off the duct tape. Inside was a small silver thumb drive and a yellowed white envelope. On the envelope, 3 words, "For my wife." The handwriting, shaky but neat, was identical to that of the last pages of the journal. "He prepared this in the last week before he died," Ethan said, looking at the bag in my hands, his eyes red. He was very weak, could barely sit up, but he insisted I help him up, comb his hair, and put on his best shirt. "He said he wanted to record a few words for you because he was afraid his handwriting would be illegible or that you would forget his voice." I caressed the cold thumb drive. A wave of fear washed over me. I wanted to hear his voice, to see him, but I was also afraid to face his emaciated image. I was afraid I couldn't bear to see the handsome man I once knew ravaged by disease. But the desire to see him again, even through a screen, overcame the fear. Ethan, as if reading my thoughts, stood up and went to a corner, pulling out an old laptop. "I still have this laptop, the one he used to record the video. I haven't dared to delete anything or watch it a second time. It's too much." He placed the laptop on the table and plugged in the thumb drive. The screen lit up, showing a single folder named Legacy. I held my breath. My trembling finger moved the mouse toward the single video file inside. Ethan gracefully stood up and went out onto the balcony to light a cigarette, leaving me alone with Daniel. I sat there in front of the inert screen, feeling as if I were before a door connecting life and death. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. I knew that after this click, my life would be turned upside down again, but I couldn't run anymore. I needed to hear him, to know what he had left for me in his final moments. My finger clicked. The screen flickered, and then the image appeared. The image on the screen trembled slightly before stabilizing, likely due to Ethan's unsteady hand holding the camera. The background was this same miserable apartment, but with a bit more light. Daniel was sitting up, propped against the headboard of the bed, with several pillows supporting his skeletal back. When I saw him, I had to cover my mouth to keep from screaming. This was not the handsome, elegant Daniel of 7 years ago. The man in the video was consumed. His hollow cheeks accentuated his sharp cheekbones. His thick black hair had been shaved off, revealing a pale scalp. His skin had a waxy, sallow pallor. His eyes were sunken and dark, but they still shone with the same familiar warmth. He was wearing the white shirt I had given him for our 3rd wedding anniversary. It was now huge on him, hanging loosely on his frame of skin and bones. The open collar revealed a sharp clavicle, but what hurt the most was his smile. He was trying to smile for the camera, a forced smile, twisted by pain, but filled with love. "Hey, Laura," ex-wife. Daniel's voice, coming from the laptop speakers, was hoarse, weak, and halting, a far cry from his deep, resonant voice of before. "By the time you see this video, the grass on my grave will be pretty tall, maybe even up to your knees." He paused to catch his breath, his chest rising and falling with difficulty under the large shirt. He raised a hand and waved, trying to seem playful. "How do I look? A little rough around the edges, right? Don't you dare say I'm ugly, okay?" I told Ethan to put some makeup on me, but the guy has no skills. I don't know what he put on me, but I look like a clown. I broke down, my tears blurring his image on the screen. "Daniel, even on the verge of death, you're trying to make me laugh. You didn't want me to see you suffer, so you used that bitter humor to hide the raw reality. Didn't you know that seeing you try to be cheerful hurt me 1,000 times more than if I had seen you cry?" "Laura," his voice turned serious, with no trace of a joke. "I know you're crying. Don't cry. You get so ugly when you cry. Your eyes swell up like a panda's. And who's going to look at you at work tomorrow? Come on, stop it. Listen to me." He raised his skeletal hand and brought it toward the screen as if he wanted to reach through time and space to wipe away my tears. The gesture was so familiar that I instinctively leaned forward, wanting to rest my head on his hand, but I only touched the cold glass of the screen. "I'm sorry," Daniel said, his eyes looking directly at the camera, deep and sad. "I'm sorry for leaving you alone in this world. I promised to protect you for life, to grow old together until our teeth fell out, but I broke my promise. I'm a scoundrel. I'm leaving first. Don't be mad at me, okay? I shook my head at the screen, saying through sobs, I'm not mad. I'm not mad, Daniel. I'm just mad at how foolish you were. Why did you hide it from me? Why did you endure it all alone? In the video, Daniel began to cough violently, his whole body writhing. Ethan, off camera, tried to step in to help, but Daniel waved him away. He held it in, covered his mouth, and after a long moment of ragged breathing, he was able to continue. I don't have much time. There are some important things I have to explain to you, so you don't have any more doubts, so you don't hold a grudge against me. The video continued. Daniel took a sip of water from a glass Ethan handed him. He winced as he swallowed, as if there were thorns in his throat. After a few seconds to compose himself, he looked steadily at the camera, his expression becoming serious and full of remorse. The first thing I want to explain is about that day at the courthouse, Daniel said, his voice trembling. Remember? It was pouring rain. I saw you drenched, shivering from cold and rage. When I threw the card at you, I felt my hand shaking. I had to hold back, to grit my teeth to say those cruel words. I told you it was charity, to get lost. Daniel looked down, avoiding the camera, as if fleeing my accusatory gaze from the future. In reality, at that moment, what I wanted most was to run and hug you. I wanted to get on my knees and beg for your forgiveness, to tell you I loved you more than anything in the world. But I looked at myself. I looked at the medical report in my pocket. I couldn't. If I hugged you, you'd feel how thin I was, you'd smell the medicine, and most importantly, if I softened at that moment, you would never agree to leave me. Daniel smiled sadly. I know your character, Laura. You're very sentimental. If you knew I was dying, you'd sell everything. You'd quit your job to take care of me in the hospital. You'd watch me lose my hair, vomit blood, lose control of my body. It would traumatize you for life. I didn't want that. I wanted the Daniel in your memory to always be the handsome, arrogant man. Even if he was a bastard, it was better than being a walking corpse. I listened to his every word as if I were swallowing hot coals. The raw, painful truth was being revealed through the weak voice of the deceased. He had played the villain perfectly, so well that he had deceived the woman he had shared a bed with for years. He accepted my undying hatred just to give me peace in the future. You know, Daniel continued, his eyes glistening with tears, when you turned and walked away in the rain, I watched you from the car in the rearview mirror. I felt like my heart was being ripped out. You bent down to pick up the card. I was both happy and hurt. Happy because you took it, which meant you would have a way out, but hurt because I knew that act had deeply wounded your pride. I'm sorry. 1,000 times I'm sorry. I used the worst possible way to love you. I caressed his face on the screen, a gaunt face that held a love as immense as it was foolish. I wanted to tell him I had forgiven him long ago, ever since Ethan told me the truth, but he could no longer hear me. He was forever stuck in that moment, filled with remorse for having hurt me. I made a bet with Ethan, Daniel said, his voice a little stronger. I bet you wouldn't spend the money right away. I trusted my wife's pride, and I knew that pride would help you stand on your own 2 feet in the tough times ahead. You would work twice as hard, 3 times as hard, to prove me wrong. And that process would forge you. It would turn you from a spoiled, weak little girl into a strong, independent woman. That's the greatest legacy I wanted to leave you. Not the money on the card, I nodded through my tears. He was right. He had won this painful bet. I matured through pain. I was strengthened by hatred. But the price of that maturity was too high. It was paid with his loneliness and his death. He taught me how to live without him, but not how to forget him. Daniel paused in the video to breathe. His breath was a whistle, like wind seeping through a crack. He put a hand to his chest to suppress an imminent pain, and then looked at me with determination. He began to talk about what I had always wondered about, the $2 million he had hidden on that old card. You're wondering why I lied about the amount, right? Daniel smiled, a weak but mischievous smile. I said there was $10,000 because I wanted to test you. I know my wife has immense pride. If $10,000 already seemed like a small, humiliating amount to you, how would you accept $2 million? If I had told you the real figure from the start, would you have been scared? Would you think I was involved in something illegal, or would you have returned it immediately so as not to be a gold digger? I nodded unconsciously, tears still streaming down my face. He was right, too right. 7 years ago, I was a young woman filled with pride. I would have rather starved than accept such a large sum from an unfaithful husband. It was the paltry amount of $10,000, combined with his dismissive attitude, that wounded my self-esteem and made me keep the card as proof to motivate myself to fight. Those $2 million, Daniel's voice turned serious. They're all I had left after selling the company. I knew you wouldn't use them right away, but I left them there. I wanted them to be your safety net. Life is unpredictable, Laura. No one knows what will happen tomorrow. If you get sick, if something happens to you, or if the man you're with in the future doesn't treat you well, this money will give you the option to choose. He looked deeply into the camera as if he wanted to burn every word into my mind. If you haven't remarried, use this money to travel the world. Go to New Orleans like we promised. Go to the places you love. Eat the best food. Don't save it. Life is short. And if you are already married, consider it the dowry I'm giving you. With money in hand, you'll have standing. Your in-laws won't dare to look down on you. You won't have to live seeking anyone's approval. I listened with a broken heart. Even in his last moments, as life was slipping away, he was only thinking about my future. He worried I would be looked down upon, that I wouldn't have money, that I would suffer from poverty. He had prepared a perfect escape route for me, the greatest security a man can give the woman he loves. I know you'll call me materialistic, that you think money is everything, Daniel smiled bitterly. But Laura, when you're facing death, you realize how important money is. It couldn't buy my life, but it can buy your freedom and your peace of mind. I can't be by your side to protect you anymore, so let this money do it for me. Don't refuse it. Don't throw away my life's work for some false pride. Promise me? I buried my face in my hands, sobbing inconsolably. I didn't despise his money. I was hurt that this money was obtained in exchange for his life and his brilliant career. He had sold everything, accepted walking away with empty hands just to leave me a fortune and an eternal remorse. I will keep your money, I thought, but not to enjoy it. I'll use it to fulfill your unfinished dreams, to live a life worthy of your great sacrifice. The video was nearing its end. The light in the room seemed dimmer, or maybe it was my eyes, clouded by tears. Daniel looked much more tired. He rested his head against the pillow, his eyelids drooping, but he fought to keep them open, fixed on the camera. His breathing was heavy, his chest rising and falling with difficulty. "Laura," he called my name, his voice a whisper. "I know you're crying. You cry a lot, don't you? I already told you, don't cry. You get so ugly, with your red nose and swollen eyes. You have to smile. Smile like the day I proposed to you." He tried to move his hand across the screen as if to wipe my tears. "Come on, be good. When I'm gone, you have to live happily for both of us. You have to dress well, wear makeup, go out with your friends. Don't lock yourself in the past. Don't get depressed over a dead man. I don't want to see you sad." I couldn't rest in peace. I shook my head. The tears kept falling. How could I be happy knowing this painful truth? How could I smile when the man who loved me most had gone in solitude and pain? "You're selfish, Daniel. You ask me to forget you, to be happy, but you leave me with such a profound longing." "Find a good man," Daniel said. His voice choked, each word a wound for him and for me. "Find someone healthy who can live to be 100 to take care of you, not a wreck like me. Someone who knows how to cook, who pampers you, who comforts you when you cry. If he makes you suffer, take my money, throw the bills in his face, and leave. Don't put up with anything. Got it?" I felt like salt was being poured on my wound. He was giving me instructions to marry someone else. He was pushing me into the arms of a stranger before he drew his last breath. Does such a noble and foolish man exist? He loved me. He was jealous of a stranger, but he was willing to bless my happiness with another just because he knew he could no longer make me happy. "I'm serious." Daniel looked at me, his eyes so sincere it hurt. "I'm not jealous." "Well, maybe a little, just a little. But I'd rather see you happy with someone else than for you to be alone your whole life." You deserve to be loved, Laura. You're the best woman in the world. I just wasn't lucky enough to walk with you to the end of the road. I buried my head on the table, sobs choking me. Daniel, please stop. There is no one better than you. No one who would love me with their life like you did. You set the bar for love so high that all other men seem insignificant. You tell me to find happiness, but my happiness left with you to that cold grave. The laptop screen began to flicker. The battery on Ethan's camera must have been dying, just like Daniel's life. His image was intermittent, but his voice continued, weak yet longing. He looked at the camera one last time, his eyes holding a universe of love and longing, as if he wanted to burn my image into his soul to take with him to the next world. If there's a next life, Daniel said, his voice breaking, I promise you. I promise I'll exercise every day. I'll eat healthy. I won't smoke. I won't work late. I'll have a strong, healthy body. He paused to take a breath, pain contorting his face, but he still tried to smile. I'll live a long time, until I'm 99, to be a grumpy old man next to my grumpy old Laura. In the next life, I won't fight you. I won't lie and say I don't love you anymore. I won't play the traitor. I won't get a divorce. We'll argue. We'll get mad, but we'll never let go of each other's hand. Okay? I nodded frantically at the screen as if he could see me. Okay, Daniel. Yes, 1,000 times yes. We got it wrong in this life. We owe each other too many tears and misunderstandings. If there is a next life, I will find you. I will make you keep your promise. I won't let you push me away. No matter what, I'll hold on to you. I'm tired, Daniel sighed, his eyelids heavy. I need to sleep for a bit. Ethan is already scolding me. Goodbye, Laura. Remember to live well. I love you. I love you more than anything in the world. The image blurred and then went black. The video ended. The room fell into a terrifying silence, broken only by my sobs and the whirring of the laptop's fan. I stared at the black screen, a feeling of emptiness washing over me. He was really gone. His final goodbye, his promise for the next life, had been delivered, leaving me alone in this vast world. I hugged the laptop, resting my face on the still warm screen, as if searching for one last trace of his heat. Daniel, I heard you. I promise I will live well. But you have to keep your promise, too. In the next life, you have to find me. You can't abandon me again. That promise of another life seemed distant and vague, but it was the only hope I could cling to. I believed that death was not the end, just a temporary separation. Somewhere, in another time and space, he was waiting for me, healthy and smiling, ready to take my hand and continue our journey. I closed the laptop and put it back in its place. The atmosphere in the apartment felt colder after Daniel's voice faded. Ethan was still on the balcony. His cigarette had long since burned out, the ash falling to the floor. He came in, looked at my swollen eyes, sighed, and sat on the plastic chair. It was time to hear the end of this tragic story, the part I feared most but needed to know. That night, Ethan began, his voice low, like an echo from beyond the grave. It was pouring rain, just like the day you went to the courthouse. Thunder and lightning. The wind howled at the windows like a lament. Daniel was very weak. He hadn't eaten anything all day, just delirious. I held my breath, my heart clenching. I remembered that stormy night. I was curled up in my bed, listening to the rain, feeling empty. I didn't know that not far away, my ex-husband was drawing his last breaths. Just before dawn, he suddenly woke up, lucid. Ethan continued, his gaze distant. He asked me to help him sit up. He looked out the window toward your apartment. The light in your room was already off. You were probably asleep. He stared, as if to burn that image into his memory one last time. Then he turned to me and said, Ethan, I'm so cold. I want to go home, but my home isn't mine anymore. That sentence was a stab to my heart. His house, our home, he had sold it to give me the money. He wanted to go home, but he had nowhere to go. He died in a temporary, cold and strange rented room, with no family other than his best friend. He started to get delirious. Ethan's voice broke. He kept saying your name, over and over. Laura, it hurts. Laura, don't leave me. He waved his hands in the air, as if searching for someone's hand. I took his hand. It was ice cold and skeletal. I told him, "I'm here, Ethan is here, hold on." But he couldn't hear me, he just kept saying your name. I covered my mouth to keep from wailing. He called for me as he was dying. He needed me. He wanted me by his side. And where was I? Sleeping peacefully, or dreaming of a bright future without him? My indifference was the life sentence I would have to carry for the rest of my days. And then he was gone, Ethan said, his voice barely a whisper. He passed at dawn just as the rain stopped. He went peacefully, like a candle burning out. His eyes were still open, looking toward the window, toward your home. I had to close them several times. He asked for a simple funeral, to be cremated and his ashes left at a temple, without any big ceremony, without notifying anyone, especially you. He was afraid that if you found out, you would come and see his ravaged body. I listened, feeling my soul leave my body. He died alone, consumed by longing and worry for the one he left behind. He didn't allow anyone to mourn him, to give him a proper funeral. He disappeared from this world in silence, as if he had never existed, just to protect my peace. His death was the saddest, most silent note in the tragic symphony of our life. I insisted on seeing Daniel's grave immediately, despite Ethan trying to dissuade me, saying it was already getting dark and that I wasn't well after such a shock. I couldn't wait another minute. I wanted to see him, to touch the place where he rested, even if it was just a cold grave. Ethan drove his old car out of the noisy city toward the desolate outskirts. The landscape changed rapidly, from skyscrapers to barren fields covered in weeds. The gray evening sky was heavy with dark clouds. The car stopped at the foot of a barren hill. The wind howled. It was the municipal cemetery for the poor, the homeless, the families without the means to buy a plot in a private cemetery. Ethan led me up a bumpy dirt path. The weeds came up to my knees, scratching my legs, but I felt nothing. The pain in my heart had numbed my other senses. We stopped in a remote corner of the hillside. Before me was a tiny grave, almost lost among the others, with no mausoleum, no polished marble, just a mound of dirt surrounded by bricks, covered in weeds and dry leaves. The cheap headstone was covered in moss, but I instantly recognized that familiar smile. In the black and white photo, Daniel was smiling, that arrogant, carefree smile I had once hated, now tore my heart apart. Why? I knelt before the grave, my trembling hands caressing the cold photo. Why are you here? You had $2 million. Why did you let yourself be buried in this desolate place? Ethan, behind me, spoke in a low voice that blended with the wind. It was his wish. He said that all the money from the sale of the company was for you, down to the last cent. He said, "When I'm dead, it doesn't matter where I am. A corpse is just a corpse. Why waste money on a nice spot? Let my wife use that money to live well, to live happily." He also chose this spot because it's high up. From here, you can see the city lights where you live. I listened, and my tears fell like rain, soaking the dry earth. Daniel, you were stingy to the extreme with yourself, even in your own death, just to be generous with me. You accepted this cramped, cold place, enduring the sun, the rain, and the wind, just so I could live in a big, comfortable house. Your sacrifice didn't end in life. It continued even after your death. I frantically pulled the weeds from his grave, my hands getting scratched and bloody. I wanted to clean it, to make it up to him, even just a little. I took the powerful black card from my bag and placed it on his headstone. "Daniel, I brought you your money. Here's the $2 million. Get up. Buy yourself a mansion, a luxury car. Get well. I don't want it. I'm giving it all back to you." I screamed until my voice broke in the wind, but I was only answered by the deathly silence of the cemetery at dusk. There were no miracles. The card remained motionless on the cold stone. The figure of $2 million became absurdly insignificant. What good is so much money if the person who needed it most is gone? What good is it if it can't buy a single breath from the person you love? I rested my head on the headstone, feeling the piercing cold on my skin, as if he were holding me one last time with the icy arms of death. The next morning, I took the first bus to Daniel's hometown. The old clapboard house, at the foot of a gnarled oak tree, was just as I remembered it from 7 years ago. The rusty iron gate was ajar, the brick patio covered in quiet moss. I walked in, my heart pounding, guilt weighing on my shoulders. For 7 years, because of my hatred for Daniel, I had also cut off contact with his parents. I thought they were like him, cruel and self-serving, that they had condoned him leaving me for a rich woman. "Who is it?" An old, trembling voice came from inside the house. Daniel's mother came out, leaning on a cane. Her hair was completely white, her back stooped. When she saw me, she froze. The cane fell to the ground with a clatter. Her clouded eyes widened and filled with tears. "Laura, is that you, child?" She walked clumsily toward me, nearly tripping. I ran to support her. "Mom, it's me. I came to see you." Daniel's father came out too. He had aged so much, his face a roadmap of time and sorrow. They both hugged me, crying like children. The sound of old people weeping was heart-wrenching. We went inside. On the mantelpiece, Daniel's photo took center stage. The smoke from an incense stick curled upward. "Dad, Mom, how long have you known Daniel was gone?" I asked, a lump in my throat, not daring to look at his picture. Daniel's father wiped his tears with the sleeve of his shirt. "Since he got sick, child, he came here, knelt down, and begged our forgiveness. Said he was a bad son, that he was leaving before he could ever repay us. He gave us a bank book with $100,000 in it. Said it was from the sale of the company. For our old age. Then why didn't you call me?" I reproached them, but my voice was weak. "Why did you hide it from me for 7 years? I was his wife, your daughter-in-law." Daniel's mother took my hand, a calloused but warm hand. She sobbed. "It was Daniel. He forbade us. He made us swear on the ancestors' altar that we wouldn't tell you anything. He said if you knew, you would suffer, that you wouldn't be able to rebuild your life. He said it was better for you to hate him, even to hate this whole family, as long as you could live well. We loved you so much, child. So many times we wanted to call you, but when we remembered his last wish, we didn't dare." I looked at those 2 white-haired heads, my heart breaking. Not only had Daniel sacrificed himself, but his parents had also endured this terrible pain in silence. They lost their son and couldn't mourn with anyone, and on top of that, they had to bear the reputation of being a cruel family to their daughter-in-law. They swallowed their tears, accepted my misunderstanding, my distance, just to fulfill their son's last wish. He said, Daniel's father looked at the mantelpiece, that he was most in debt to you, that if he couldn't take care of you, we couldn't bother you either. We're old now. We'll take this pain to our graves. But you're young. You have your whole life ahead of you. You can't live tormented by the shadow of a dead man. I buried my head in my mother-in-law's lap, crying like never before. The generosity of this family was immense, so much so that it made me feel small and selfish. I had lived in a blind hatred while they protected me from afar with the greatest love. "Daniel, what kind of family were you born into to be so noble it hurts?" Back in the city, I held the powerful black card, feeling it weigh as much as a mountain. I returned to my small, rented room, the one that had been with me through my hardest years. The room was the same damp walls, the old fan creaking, but I was different. I was no longer the poor girl who worried about every meal, every dollar of rent. Now I was a millionaire, but strangely, I felt no joy or relief, only a terrifying emptiness. I sat on the bed, looking at the card on the table. $2 million. It could buy me a luxury mansion, a sports car, designer clothes, but it couldn't buy back a family dinner with Daniel's laughter or his warm hug on cold winter nights. I remembered his words in the video. He bet that I wouldn't spend the money right away. He wanted me to fight for myself, to mature. He was right, and it was cruel. The hatred he planted in me was the strongest stimulant for survival. If I had known about his illness 7 years ago, I probably would have collapsed. But out of hatred, to prove to him that I could live well without him, I gritted my teeth and worked, overcoming every difficulty. That hatred fueled me, forged me into the strong woman I am today. But now that the truth was out, the hatred vanished, and I felt like a puppet without strings. My goal for 7 years was to get revenge on him with my success. Now, that goal was pointless. He was dead. He couldn't see my success. Or rather, he had seen it all and was smiling with satisfaction from his grave. I picked up my phone. The screen was dark. No messages from debt collectors, no calls from the landlord. The financial pressure had vanished in an instant, but it was replaced by the pressure of loneliness. This sudden wealth didn't bring me the freedom I expected, but a golden cage that locked me in his memory. Every dollar I spent from now on would be soaked in his sweat and blood. How could I enjoy it? I got up and went to the window, looking across the street at the apartment Daniel had rented. The window was closed, dark. The silent observer was no longer there. From now on, I would have to live my own life, with no eyes watching over me, no secret protection. I had to face this harsh reality. I was rich, but I was utterly alone. I began to pack my things, the old clothes, the cheap items that had been with me for so many years. I put them in boxes. I would leave this place, not to run from the past, but to start a new journey. The journey Daniel had paved with his life. I would not waste his effort. I would live a bright, strong life, as he had hoped, even if my heart had a broken piece that could never be filled. The rumor that I suddenly had $2 million spread like wildfire, perhaps through the gossipy bank teller or the curious neighbors who saw me get into a luxury car. Overnight, my life turned upside down in a way I hadn't expected, but one that was brutally realistic. First thing in the morning, my phone started ringing off the hook. Unknown numbers, names that had vanished from my life a decade ago. A distant cousin, Jessica, who 7 years ago, when I asked to borrow $200 for my mother's medicine, had thrown me out like a dog, now called to ask about my health with the tenderness of a mother. She whined about her difficult situation and ended by asking to borrow $50,000 to start a business. Then, my best friends from college, the ones who had laughed at me when I was working washing dishes, were now texting to meet up, to reminisce about old times. They praised me, saying I was so smart and low-key. Someone even had the audacity to show up at my apartment with an investment proposal for a pyramid scheme. I sat with them on the patio of a neighborhood bar, still in my simple clothes, watching their eager faces, their eyes shining as they talked about money. I felt disgusted. This society was ruthlessly materialistic. When you're poor, you're an outcast, but when you have money, you suddenly become everyone's most beloved relative. I remembered Daniel. He gave me everything without asking for anything in return. The contrast between my late husband's true love and the phoniness of these people made me appreciate him even more. Daniel had taught me the lesson of dignity in poverty, and now, indirectly, he was teaching me the lesson of clarity in wealth. I would not let his blood-earned money fall into the hands of those who didn't deserve it. I would protect it as if it were his very soul. My cousin Jessica was now clutching my hand tightly, sobbing loudly about her son's gambling debts. She wailed, drawing the attention of nearby tables as if trying to use social pressure to break me. But she didn't know that my heart, forged in the fire of a false betrayal and a real death, was harder than steel. "Laura, you have $2 million. Just lend me $100,000. It's nothing to you, but it's my son's life. Are you going to let the loan sharks break his legs?" she cried. I pulled my hand from hers, which was sweaty and sticky, and took a sip of iced tea. The bitter taste cleared my mind. I looked her directly in the eyes with a coldness that made her shiver. Her sobs died in her throat. "Cousin Jessica," I said calmly, but with a frigid voice, "you say $100,000 is nothing. Do you know what I paid for that nothing? I paid for it with my husband's bone marrow, with his blood, with his agonizing pain. Daniel sold his life for this money. Do you think I'm going to use my husband's blood to pay off your son's gambling debts?" Jessica's jaw dropped. Her face went from red to pale white. She stammered, But the dead are dead. You're alive. You have to worry about the living. As rich as you are, what's a little help? You're so stingy. No wonder your husband left you." Before she could finish, I slammed my glass on the table. "Shut up," I snarled, each word hissing between my teeth. "You have no right to mention my husband. You will not get a single cent of my money. I would rather burn it and let it reach Daniel in the afterlife than feed opportunists and ungrateful leeches. Get out of my sight and don't ever come looking for me again." I turned and walked away, leaving her speechless. I knew that from this day on, I would have a reputation for being rich and stingy, but I didn't care. I had learned Daniel's greatest lesson. Kindness must be given to those who deserve it, otherwise it's just stupidity. That same afternoon, I went to one of the most prestigious law firms in the city. I'm no business expert, but I know how to protect money. I hired a lawyer to draft a will and create a trust. I was afraid of having a fate as short as Daniel's, afraid that if I died suddenly, this blood-earned money would be devoured by vultures. The lawyer looked at me with surprise. "Mrs. Laura, to whom do you wish to leave your entire estate? Should something happen?" I looked out the window. The image of Daniel's elderly, grieving parents appeared in my mind. "Half will go to my in-laws for their old age," I replied firmly. "The other half, use it to help cancer patients without resources, people like my husband who don't have money to buy painkillers." Leaving the law firm, I felt light. I had secured Daniel's treasure, turning it into an impregnable fortress. I wasn't just protecting the money. I was protecting his honor and his love. That night, it rained again. I curled up in bed, listening to the rhythmic tapping on the roof. A heart-wrenching nostalgia washed over me. How long had it been since I heard Daniel's laugh? How long since I felt the warmth of his hand? I fell asleep to the sound of the rain, and then he came. In my dream, I was standing in front of the courthouse again. It was pouring. In the distance, Daniel leaned against his car in his black trench coat, but this time, he wasn't looking at me with contempt. His deep eyes were filled with love and regret. He dropped his cigarette, crushed it under his heel, and walked quickly toward me. He didn't toss the card at me. Instead, he opened his arms and held me tight. "Daniel," I sobbed his name, feeling his familiar warmth, his scent of tobacco and mint that I had missed so much. "Where have you been? Why did you leave me for so long? I've missed you so much." He held me tighter, stroking my hair. "I'm sorry. I haven't gone anywhere. I've always been here, right by your side, Laura. You've suffered so much. You did so well. Better than I ever expected." I looked at him. His face was no longer gaunt. He was the Daniel from before, handsome and full of life. He wiped my tears and smiled. "Don't cry anymore. Nothing hurts anymore. I'm strong now. I could carry you on my back all over New York City without getting tired." "Liar!" I punched him softly on the chest, laughing and crying. "You're a liar. You said you'd live to be 99. Give me my husband back." He took my hand and placed it over his heart. I felt its beat, strong and steady. "I can't give you back my body, but this heart, this love, will always be yours. Laura, live happily. Don't hold on to sadness. Only if you smile can I rest in peace." Slowly, he let me go. His figure faded into the rain. I ran after him, trying to hold on, but I only grasped at air. "Daniel, don't go! Don't leave me alone! I'll be waiting for you." His voice came from the distance, light as the wind. "At the end of the road, I'll be waiting. Live well, my love." I woke with a jolt, soaked in sweat and tears. The room was dark. Only the sound of the rain remained. I sat up and touched my chest, where Daniel had touched me in the dream. The warmth seemed to still be there. It wasn't a nightmare. It was healing. Daniel had come back to say goodbye, to comfort my broken soul. He was no longer in pain. He was free. The dream was like a cleansing rain for my parched soul. I dried my tears and smiled in the darkness. He was still here, in my heart, and he was waiting for me. I was no longer alone. After that dream, it was as if I was reborn. I started doing what Daniel wanted, what he had earned for me with his life. First, I went to the bank. I requested to move the $2 million into long-term deposits and government bonds, leaving only a small portion for expenses. "I don't want to be richer," I told the manager. "This money is my husband's sweat and blood. I don't want to gamble with it. I just want security." I went back to Daniel's hometown. This time, I asked my in-laws for permission to renovate the family home. "Mom," I told my mother-in-law, "this is the money Daniel is giving you. If he can't take care of you, I will in his place. Don't refuse it, or he won't rest in peace." I stayed for a week, cooking, cleaning, and talking with them. I told them about their son's immense love. Those stories eased their pain and healed my wounds. I understood that the best revenge against pain is not hatred, but living happily. Daniel had sacrificed himself so that I could be happy, so I had no right to be miserable. I had to live intensely, to enjoy every second for both of us. With a portion of the monthly interest, I made anonymous donations to the Cancer Patient Assistance Foundation at the hospital where Daniel was treated. I believed that from somewhere, he could see it and would be proud. A year later, Carmel by the Sea greeted me with a fine mist rolling in from the Pacific. I was sitting in a small cafe overlooking the ocean, just as Daniel had promised for our never-realized honeymoon. In front of me was a glass of red wine and an empty chair. "I'm here, Daniel," I whispered, raising my glass to the empty seat. "Carmel is beautiful, just like you said. The coffee is delicious, and the wine is bitter at first, but sweet at the end, just like our life." I took a sip, watching the couples stroll by. I felt no envy, no pity. I felt that Daniel was there, right beside me. I never remarried or sought a new love. The love I experienced was so profound that any other feeling seemed bland in comparison. I took out the black card and placed it on the table, smiling. "See? I'm spending your money. I'm staying in a 5-star hotel, eating at Michelin-starred restaurants. I'm buying designer handbags. I'm being very bad. Does it hurt you? If so, show up and scold me." The ocean breeze rustled my hair. I thought I heard his deep, affectionate laugh in the wind. "Spend it, honey. I earned the money so you could spend it, as long as you're happy." I put the card away and stood up. I would continue my journey. After Carmel, New Orleans, and then a drive up the Pacific Coast Highway. All the places he had written in his journal that he wanted to visit with me. I would travel for his tired legs. I would see the world for his closed eyes. I would live a life that was free, without ties or regrets. I walked out of the cafe and into the crowd. The Carmel sky, clear after the mist, was a brilliant blue. A vibrant rainbow arched across the sky over the bay. I lifted my head and took a deep breath of the fresh, free air. "Here I come, Daniel. Our journey is still long." I walked with a light, steady step. My shadow stretched long on the old cobblestone street, solitary, but proud and full of hope.